Ah, there I am. Hello. It is Unit 11, Lesson 8, where we are going over the third part of graphing trig functions. You had your A, which was your amplitude, the C, which changed the midline, and then the B, which is going to be the term in front of the X that will change the frequency. Okay? So what we have originally is we have the graph of y equals 3 cosine x, where your amplitude is 3 and there is no c term, so the midline is just your x-axis. When we look in part A, we have the same graph, except now we have introduced a term in front of the x value, which is the b term. So b equals 2. Now what b is called a frequency. Okay, so b is a frequency. So that's how many complete curves should occur between 0 and 2 pi. That's what a frequency is. Now, from this b, we also find what is called the period. So the period has a formula of p equals 2 pi over b. So my period equals 2 pi over 2, which is just pi. So what that means is that between 0 and pi, we should have one complete curve. So in order to graph that, we have the same high and low. The highest is 3, the lowest is -3. The amplitude does not change. But we need to have one complete curve between 0 and pi. So if this is my highest value, I have to have another highest value here. I don't know if you can see these dots I'm making. And then the lowest value has to be down here. So about in the middle right here and here, we should go through. I should have made a different color. All right, so that's the one curve. So if we want it between 0 and 2 pi, same thing, has to come down here and up here, and then in between, approximately there, would be your next curve. So that's what's happening when you have a 2 in front of the x. So that means you have two complete curves between 0 and 2 pi. So that's what part B is asking. It's asking how many full cycles or periods of this function now fit within 2 pi radians, and that is just 2. And then, I know it says using your calculator, but you're going to have to put it on the grid. So sketch the graph of 3 cosine 1/2 on the same axis. So now what happens is my b is 1/2, 1 over 2. So that means that half a curve will occur between 0 and 2 pi. If we want to find the period, it is 2 pi over b, which is 1/2, which you would multiply, so 2 pi times 2 over 1, which is 4 pi. So that means that it takes between 0 and 4 pi to do one complete curve. So if we go up here to graph this, and I'll put this one in a different color, hopefully, we now have to stretch it such that it has the same high point, but now only half of the curve is going to occur between 0 and 2 pi. Okay, that's what this 1/2 is. So we have to have at 2 pi half of the curve. So at pi will be a point where it goes through the x-axis. And there it is. It's only half the curve. And I'm only focusing on between 0 and 2 pi, because that's usually what you'll have to do on the Regents exam. Okay? So now it says how many full cycles or periods of this function now fit within 2 pi radians, and that's just a half. Okay, half of a full cycle. So the graph in exercise 1 state the frequency and the period. So the b value is your frequency, and all this up here is just what I was pretty much explaining. So my b is 1, my period is 2 pi over b, which is 2 pi. So this frequency right here means that there's one complete curve. This means that we need one complete curve completed between 0 and 2 pi. So when it's 1, it's easy. That's what you're used to seeing. In letter B, okay, my b is 2. My period is 2 pi over b, which is pi. So the frequency means 2 is the number of curves between 0 and 2 pi, And the period means this is how long it takes to complete one curve. So between 0 and pi, there's one complete curve. And then the last one, which we kind of already did up above all of these, is we have the 1/2, and the period is 2 pi over 1/2, which gives me 4 pi. So half a curve between 0 and 2 pi, it takes 4 pi, 0 to 4 pi, to do one complete curve. Okay? And that's what's going on in exercise 3. Just your period equals 2 pi over b. Very important formula. Remember, I told you this could be a part 4 question. If it is, hopefully we get this down pat. That's 6 points. So in exercise 4, we want to determine the period of each of the following functions. Sinusoidal, that's what they call it. They're called sinusoidal functions. So express your answers in exact form. So the period of each, so first thing first, there's my b. Identify what b is. B is 4. A is 6. So period is 2 pi over b, which is pi over 2. That's it. That's your period. Period is pi over 2. You can also have a pi in front of the x. So my b is pi over 3. The period is 2 pi over pi over 3. Now I'll show you this one in a little more detail so you can see what's going on here. So the 2 pi stays the same. And then you're going to times, and you have to invert this. So it's 3 over pi. The pi's will cancel, and you get 6. So that's your period. And in the last one, you have 2/3. So I have 2 pi. Oops, sorry. B is 2/3. So 2 pi over 2/3. So again, invert and multiply. And what we would get is we would get 2 pi times 3 over 2. Cancel, cancel. So you have 3 pi. Okay? If you have questions on that, see me. It's just plugging into the formula. If you need me to slow down and do it again in class, I will. Not a problem. All right, so now in exercise 5, we're going to sketch the function y equals 2 sine 4x on the grid below for one full period to the left and to the right of the y-axis. I'm just going to do the right, because like I said, usually it's 0 to 2 pi. So what we want to identify, we have to identify what is given, your A, your B, and your C, because that's what we've learned so far. A is 2, B is 4, C does not exist, so that means the x-axis is the midline. Remember, the A tells you how high you go. So since the C does not exist, there's nothing there, the x-axis is the midline, that means I go up to 2 and down to -2. My B is 4. That means my period is 2 pi over 4. So I have 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. Now, what we're going to do, we want one full period, and that's it. So one full period. So this here is going to be pi over 2. That's going to be my pi over 2. Okay? Now we have to have all these other values. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go to a new sheet of paper and show you how to find those values. So this is my starting. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And here's your pi over 2. Okay? So this is 0. So this point here is the first one we find. And how we find this is we do 0 plus pi over 2 divided by 2. Because this point here is the midpoint of 0 and pi over 2. So the 0 is gone, so we have pi over 2 divided by 2 over 1, which would give me pi over 2 times 1/2, which is pi over 4. Okay? Now, to find this one here, it's going to be the midpoint of 0 plus pi over 4 divided by 2. 0 cancels, so I have pi over 4 times 1/2, which is pi over 8. And then to find the last one, it's kind of tricky. Hold on just a second. I'm back. All right, so to find the blue one, we would do pi over 4 plus pi over 2 all over 2. So it gets a little tricky here because we have pi over 4 plus 2 pi over 4, because we have to have a common denominator. Okay, all over 2. So then this numerator becomes 3 pi over 4 all over 2 over 1. So you have 3 pi over 4 times 1/2, which is 3 pi over 8. Okay, so those are the way you fill those in. We'll definitely work more on that because that is very, very important when we go into graphing these. So we'll go back to red. And so we have the values, which is pi over 8. And we have pi over 4 and 3 pi over 8. And it's a sine, so that means it starts here, goes up, down, down, and up. Remember, you try to make a curve out of it, and there you go. That's one full period. And that's it. Okay, and then the last one, exercise 6. The heights of the tides can be described using a sinusoidal model. Form y equals a cosine bx plus c. If the high tides are separated by 24 hours, and which of the following gives you the frequency b of the curve? So you use the formula. P is 2 pi over b, but we know that high tides are separated by 24 hours, so my p is 24 equals 2 pi over b. So we're going to cross multiply here and get b, well, 24b equals 2 pi. Solve for b, divide by 24, and b equals pi over 12. And so that is choice number 3. Okay? So any questions? Bring them with you tomorrow, and we'll get through lesson 8, and I'll be working on lesson 9. All right. We will see you later. See ya.